If you're like me, you moved to New York City for the soul-crushing online dating scene, but you stayed for the 80-hour work weeks and the closet-sized 6th-floor walk-up apartment. Let's admit it, you're busy, but you still want to fit homebrewing in somewhere between your hour-long train commute and being stood up by your Tinder date tonight. At Bitter & Esters, we're here to help. Our online store has all the equipment, ingredients, and supplies you need to brew. And if you live in New York City, standard shipping is basically next day. You can even order your grain by the ounce, faster than swiping left.
Joking aside, we do have an awesome web store that you should all know about. For the month of October, we're offering anyone who's listening to this free shipping on all orders up to 20 pounds. So just use the code FREEFALL, that's FREEFALL, at checkout, and that should be good. It's a great way to get your brewing supplies and also support the podcast, especially if you're not in the New York City area. So check it out and then get back to work, Jack.
Jack's our employee. It's our worst commercial to date. I'm working really late. I'd love to get some homebrew supplies tonight. But I can't get out to Brooklyn on the train or by car. What am I gonna do? It's a great big fright. I'll go online at bitterandesters.com and ring the phone in the background. Worst commercial yet! bitterandesters.com.
Welcome to See What You Can Brew, the podcast about homebrewing, community, and everything beer in New York City.
Brought to you by Bitter & Esters in Brooklyn, New York. We're your hosts, Douglas Amport
and John LaPola. Well, Doug, it's that time of year again.
It sure is. The geese are heading south.
The trees are changing color.
And brewers are ruining perfectly good beer with ass loads of pumpkin and buckets of spices. I know you're all thinking it. October, Halloween, Thanksgiving. I'm going to put some fucking sweet potatoes and squash and cloves in my beer and make it goddamn seasonal.
Calm down, Doug. Let's take a minute here and discuss how to make good spiced and pumpkin beer.
That's an oxymoron, I think. Okay. Most people, when they think pumpkin beer, what are they actually thinking, John?
They're thinking pumpkin spices in their amber ale.
Which constitutes what? What kind of spices are we thinking about here?
Usually cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, allspice, ginger, shit that's in a pie.
So what kind of warning are you going to give to people when they're dumping all these spices into their boil? That's like, what's your biggest warning on using spices, other than don't?
We're being pretty negative on this podcast.
We're being a little negative. Okay, I know a lot of you out there love pumpkin beers, and you love your pumpkin spice beers. I'm sorry, I don't. So I'm going to be negative, but I have had really good ones before, and I've had really, really bad ones before. And so I'm trying to help.
Honestly, as with any ingredient that you put into beer, it's the way that you balance it with the other ingredients is very important. So the type of spices you use, the amount that you use, freshness, all this is going to be really important. So you have to take the beer into mind and say, does this need spices? Generally, the pumpkin pie spices work well with amber beers because they're a little bit sweeter with the caramel malts, and they can balance that out. I'm a fan of cinnamon. I like cinnamon in beer. If it fits the beer, I like it in pie.
You don't want to put a bunch of cinnamon into something that's super dry either,
no.
Like I say, or that's already clovey.
Right. No, I wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't put it into an IPA. I mean, so... and as far as pumpkins go, yes, you can use pumpkins. You can use squashes. I mean, they are traditional ingredients, actually, in making beer. If you're an extract brewer, you should use a can of pumpkin and just kind of steep it with your steeping grains. It will add some color, not really a ton of flavor. But if you're doing all grain, you put the pumpkin in the mash.
Okay.
You can use a can of pumpkin, but you can also roast pumpkin. Take some pumpkin, roast it first, and throw it in the mash. But the one piece of advice I would give to you about that would be make sure you have plenty of rice hulls, because the pumpkin will stick your sparge like nobody's ever stuck your sparge, baby. Honestly, a lot of these pumpkin beers don't have pumpkin in them because they're really just pumpkin spice beers.
Something I want to say that kind of piggybacks off of what you said is make good beer first.
Yes.
You can't hide a problem with spices. It's not like hops. And even hops, you can't really hide a problem, but some IPAs you can get away with a little bit of diacetyl or something that people aren't expecting or really want. But you can't hide a bad amber with clovey phenolic flavors and by calling it a pumpkin spice.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
By throwing some nutmeg and cinnamon in there and just be, oh yeah. It's
I mean, I guess maybe if the beer came out really crappy and you want to throw some spices in there just so your friends will choke it down, that's a thing. But that's really not what we're doing as home brewers.
That's not what we're doing. I mean, and I've had so many bad beers and so many bad pumpkin beers that I want to caution people not to just go dump a bunch of clove in their beers either, because clove is super strong and it comes through really, really easily.
Clove is super strong. You really need maybe one piece of clove, honestly, that you
in
crush.
a 5-gallon batch.
5-gallon batch.
5-gallon batch.
Generally with spices, just like if you're making soup, you put them at the end of the boil in order to just maintain the aromatics and some of the flavor. Now, one thing I've learned about ginger, if you're making a beer with fresh ginger, is that it works kind of like hops, that the longer you boil the fresh ginger, the more the ginger heat you'll get, but the less you boil it, the more of the ginger aroma. So you can actually have different ginger additions. But when it comes to cinnamon, or any of the other pie spices, it's really just end of boil. Some people add packaging, make a tincture, or not, it's not a tincture, but actually a tea would be the best way to do it, and add it to taste at packaging. Or when it comes to packaging, this is the way Doug likes to do it, he makes a tea with the spices, and then when it comes to packaging day, he pours it into the sink and then leaves the beer alone.
Put the beer in the cans.
Yeah,
We're done.
That's Doug's way of spicing beer. But just so you know, I've seen him actually make that spiced tea and then pour it out. Yeah, just so that, because he gets into that fall mood sometimes.
Yeah, it's fall. It's very, very festive, very seasonal. So anyway, I have had good seasonal beers, and I want to say something positive here. I don't want to be such a douchebag. I want to say something nice. One of the best beers I ever had that was seasonal like this, OVA, one of our employees, OVA made years ago. He made a fantastic sweet potato beer. He had roasted the sweet potatoes, like caramelized them and put them in the boil and some in the mash, and it was really, really good. I think he also made a sweet potato pie that he did to go with it. To go with it.
Tasted
great.
Did he actually he spice the beer too? I think
there was a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of clove, I think, in there as well. Not a lot, but yeah.
Bobby made a pie beer one time that was amazing. I don't know if you would call it spice.
That was a chocolate pecan pie.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Graham crackers and chocolate and Phoenix hops, and that was pretty awesome. That's on our website. That's the
pecan pie porter?
Yeah, the one that we call the pecan pie porter.
Yeah, he made a pie with that too.
Long history of pies and beer here at Bitter and Esters.
For sure.
We should do that event again.
We should.
Okay. So I think that's enough tearing apart spiced beers like a real jerk.
To reiterate, tis the time of the year to make some spiced beers, so go forth and make your spiced beers. Just remember that less is a lot of times more, and make sure that it balances out with the other flavors in your beer, and you will be so happy, and Doug will pat you on the back.
I'll even drink your beer.
He'll even drink your beer.
So this month we don't really have a ton of events, but we've got a couple important ones coming up. Right, Johnny?
We do. We've mentioned it before, but the Nerys annual fundraiser, Gravity, is on October 13th at Bergen in Prospect Heights, which is right down the street from the store, as we all know. So the Gravity concept is that they're going to have 32 beers on at the event, and every beer is paired with a similar style at a different original gravity. Ooh. So, for example, they have a barley wine paired with an English mild, both with a similar recipe, or a Belgian triple paired with a Belgian blonde ale. And the cool thing about this, and what I love about the Nerys, is that you can really see how much just the gravity of a beer changes the entire feel of the beer. Even though the beer is extremely similar, the only difference is basically the alcohol content, which will affect mouthfeel, will affect how drunk you get, and will affect the flavor overall. So it's neat that it's not only a fundraiser, and fun is one of the words in fundraiser.
It's going to be heavy.
About 16 pounds per square inch.
There you go.
And but it's a learning experience, man. So even if you're not a brewer, you can go in and learn more about beer and taste it up and say, I know more about beer. And I heard it on See What You Can Brew.
The best podcast in the West.
west of
Long
Island.
Long Island. Okie dokie.
Okay. So go to that. Go to that on the 13th. It's Sunday. It's going to be freaking great. And then come to the store also, because we're like right by them.
And we're going to be lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah, all our employees are going to the event and we have to work. We had a great interview with Kyle and Flint over at Randolph Beer in Williamsburg. They've got 3 locations. So if you don't know what Randolph Beer is, they are a fantastic, unique member of the Brooklyn brewery community. They've got 3 locations, 2 of which have breweries, one of which, the one in Nolita, does not have a brewery on premises, but they serve their beer. And they serve a lot of different kinds of beer. They serve their beer, and they serve other New York State and New York City beers.
And their restaurants.
They're full restaurants, which I think is really what sets them apart. I mean, the Dumbo location is all about pairing their food with their beers and with other people's beers, which nobody else in Brooklyn really, truly gets on the pairing wagon.
Jimmy did that over at Jimmy's 43. It's now
sure.
closed, but he was definitely a big part of doing the pairings.
But I mean, no brewery actually serves food and manages.
Fifth Hammer does potato chips and beer.
Well, they do events. Yeah, the potato chips and beer was really cool.
But they're not a restaurant, no.
But they're not a restaurant. So I think that's one of the things that sets them apart. And in this interview, we sat down with Kyle Kensrue, the COO for all 3 locations, and our friend Flint Whistler, who's the head brewer at the Williamsburg location.
That Williamsburg, which is a town right next to Williamsburg. It's
just a little more lurgy.
Yeah.
So we discuss the origins of the business, what inspires the beer program, and we talk a little bit about the bike ride that we did there.
Yeah, we actually made a beer with them, which was totally cool. It was a brewed IPA.
I shouldn't have forgotten that. I was there.
Yeah. In the interview, they keep calling it the experimental brewery. So it's it's just a 1-barrel system where they kind of do whatever they want, and invited us for their inaugural release, which was really pretty cool to do that. Us and the Nerys, and we made a great brewed IPA. Mm-hmm. And the bike ride has already happened. You missed it.
We tried telling you.
Or maybe you didn't miss it. Who knows?
We tried.
But it was awesome. It was really great. We went to... First, we went to Randolph Williamsburg, and drank a bunch of the beer, which was great. And then we went to Grimm, which was surprisingly not crazy on a Sunday. We actually got a table, and we all had kind of parked there for a while. It was really nice. And then we went to Interboro and drank some of their we ended up having high alcohol beers there. Mm-hmm. And not that everything they have is high alcohol, but we just decided that after drinking all day, we should have some high alcohol beers.
High gravity, if you will?
High gravity, if you will, yeah. And then we ended up at KCBC and hung out with our friends there, and that's where I had 2 beers and left. But it was ended up being a really great event.
Blast, yeah.
It was really a lot of fun. It was a lot of biking. It was a beautiful day. But it was the whole thing at Randolph was really just the best. They really accommodated us, and they've been just so nice. And I love that they have a beer wall, and we talked about it in the interview, but the beer wall is something to behold. So if you're ever in Brooklyn,
it's a beer adventure.
It's a beer adventure. Yeah. So it was really nice talking with them. Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for taking time out of the day to do this. We understand that you've been busy with everything, and that's what we're going to ask you about. It's everything you've been busy about, right?
So how did you, Kyle, come to own and be owner and founder of Randolph Beer?
Well, I've bounced around a little bit. I went to grad school in London, spent some time out west in Orange County in LA, moved to New York about 11 years ago, and I was pursuing acting as part of what I wanted to do and what I studied in college.
Do you still have any monologues prepared?
I think I could pull out a Shakespeare one or two.
No wonder you have such a good podcast.
Yeah, there you go, right?
We'll come back to that.
Many years of training. But I wasn't having fun with it anymore. I still enjoy reading Shakespeare, but, being the geek about it. But I wasn't having fun doing the auditions and the grind anymore. But I was having fun doing craft beer. And so I came across Randolph and started as actually a part-time bartender while I was doing some other things. And this was shortly after the original location in Nolita opened. When I finally made the decision of, okay, put the acting thing aside, I want to pursue hospitality and actually become like a manager and get a salary and those things. They had a position open, so it was sort of serendipitous. and I quickly became the GM of the Nolita location, then took over the Williamsburg location before it is what you see today. And then a few years after that is when we started designing Dumbo, and when the brewing part of what we were doing came around, which was sort of highly engaging for me, as that's what I wanted to do, was craft beer, and the story of beer was interesting for me, and that's kind of where I was able to meld the acting side of what I loved into the beer, was the stories that was happening. And so we opened Dumbo a little over 2 years ago, but with Williamsburg, we always knew there was something more to be had in what we were doing here. Dumbo happened right as I was becoming a manager, and sort of the germ of what Dumbo became, the sort of germination, was very at the beginning. But I've been in fully planning from the beginning what Williamsburg has, and Flint was an integral part of that. Is I met Flint as I live right next to Rockaway, so I brought Flint on, even in just beginning dialogue, a few years ago, as this has been in planning for about 3 years.
Okay. Flint, you want to tell us a little bit about your background in beer and how you came to be where we are now?
Sure. So kind of the classic story. I started off home brewing way too long ago, and selling home brews on the side just to pay for various fun expenses.
Don't do that, kids.
No, don't do that.
He's kidding, everybody.
Oh yeah, follies of youth. And then during a period of time when I was out in New Mexico, I was building decks, and there was a brewery across the valley, and they needed a hand, so I went over and helped them make beer for a summer, and it was relaxing, and it was beautiful, and I was surrounded by mountains and elk, and this one man that didn't talk really much, and just making North German beers.
I think I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
Sounds just like Brooklyn.
Yeah. Especially the elk part.
Yeah. We have homeless elk here.
Yeah.
Smell about the same. But so then came on out to New York. I was bouncing around a lot, and I was traveling the East Coast, and I just kind of fell into a job at Rockaway as their employee, the only one. And so I was making beer, selling beer, doing a little bit of everything.
I think that's where at least I met you. I don't know if John had known you before that, but I remember
I think it was all Rockaway.
All Rockaway, yeah.
All the time.
I didn't move to New York until a month after I started working at Rockaway. So
and I've never been to New Mexico, so no, we haven't met.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, and I was there for a couple of years, helped them expand and grow, and then 4 years into it, Kyle started reaching out and asking if I wanted to come on and do this, because I'd been doing this thing called Homebrew Thursdays, where every Thursday while I was bartending, I'd make a small batch of something just to kind of do it. And
I remember that. I thought that was so awesome.
It was fun. It was hard, but it was fun. And so eventually the offer got good enough that I decided to switch over, and we had a very nice amicable split, and I transitioned over to Randolph and to the experimental program.
And cheers to Ethan and Marcus over at Rockaway. It's funny because that's how we all met. Flint was at Rockaway, but they're doing great stuff over there. I was actually there on Monday night doing an off-flavor class for the New York City Brewers Guild. And
oh, cool. They're doing it there this year.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to live right there, so it's a great home-based brewery for me to just pop over, and they're making great, fantastic beers over there.
You got a lot of good breweries over that town.
I'm very lucky. Yeah. Fifth Hammer is only a stone's throw away. LIC is pretty close. Alewife's starting to make some stuff now that's really coming around that I love, so...
You came on board for the experimental beer program, but talk a little bit more about Randolph and kind of Randolph Beer.
Sure.
Because you didn't jump in and you're like, we're a brewery right away. That's our passion. That's our goal.
And in fact, beer wasn't what we started with,
exactly,
to be honest. And what we did was we had a cocktail bar. Mm-hmm. That was probably 12 years ago. I might be corrected on that, but the ethos in what we did with that cocktail bar stays true to today. When we opened that, we were actually one of the, not originals, but one of the first groups of sort of specialty cocktails, high end. The ingredients were going in were very specific, but we didn't want to have the rules and the regulations and stuff that some of the cocktail bars had at the time. And so we wanted it to be those very high-end drinks, but in a fun, welcoming, classic rock blaring on the stereo type of environment.
It doesn't have to be like, bow ties and brick on the walls.
Yeah, we did not want that.
Style. Okay.
Yeah, we wanted the quality product but in a very welcoming and inviting spot, right? Fun place where you can have fun with your friends, and that stays true to today. So when we opened the beer bar, which was probably about 8 years ago now, the one in Nolita, at the time was probably one of maybe 10 to 15. I've never really researched it, but I know we were one of more original spots for craft beer in New York City. And it was after that we were looking at this Dumbo space and had sort of too much space to work with. And the sort of natural barrier to entry of craft beer bars now is there's a dime a dozen. And so for us, the next logical step was, well, let's just start making our own beer to sort of differentiate what we do. We don't solely do our own beers, which is a conscious choice that we do.
Well, that's a very unique thing in New York City. Like, some breweries will have a tap or two online, but you guys have the beer wall which we'll get back to.
You're like a craft beer bar that also brews its own beer.
Yeah. And over time, admittedly, we do want to have more and more of our own beers, but I don't think at any point we will ever be just our Randolph beers. Majority, yes, but probably not all.
How big is the system? In
Dumbo, it's a 7-barrel system and 24 taps. And we're serving off of 6 bright tanks. So we have a few kegs. Right now I think we have about 9 of our own beers on tap. So it's I would say a nice healthy start. And eventually we're hoping that gets it more to like 15 to 16 of our own beers, and then a nice sizable chunk of guest beers. And that's because, and I think Flint could echo this, we do have a solid connection, just starting as a beer bar first, into the brewing community. I mean, the guys at KCBC, Other Half, Interborough, Grimm, they're all friends of ours. And so we love to support that as well. And each individual Randolph is going to have its own identity. Whereas here, you talk about the exploration stuff. Yeah. And in Dumbo, it's more of pairing the beer with the food on the menu. We can supplement that with the beers from around New York City and some global beers as well. We don't say it's just New York City beers.
Well, Flint, that kind of leads into a question I have for you specifically. You've got, 24 different taps, and you're not necessarily you don't have to fill all of them. How does that change your focus on what to choose to brew? I mean, you've got so many different great beers just in the city. How does that impact your choices on what you want to make and what you and Kyle agree to move forward with?
Well, it opens that up quite a bit. So I don't have to fill the gap of making a lager, a New England IPA or Northeast or however you want to call it, and instead we can make that grisette that people don't care as much about, but we can make on a small system. We can sell. It'll be cool. We can educate the community, and we can kind of explore to see whether or not this is going to be a functional beer. And so it's a lot of the brews are just kind of making something to make it, as opposed to making it for the market.
Now, this 1-barrel system that you have in Williamsburg, is that considered a pilot system, or is it really just let's have a 1-barrel system in Williamsburg because we can do it?
Both.
It's both? Yeah, so you will pilot some stuff, say, hey, we want to make this recipe, let's see how it sells and how it goes over. Right?
Exactly. I mean, the one thing about a pilot system, it differs from what we're doing here, is that every beer we're making here isn't necessarily designed to potentially scale up. We're not testing it to see if we want to brew it on a bigger scale. If it happens to be a beer that we like and we want to see it on a bigger scale, great. But that's not the end result. The end result is just exploration, learning, trying something new, seeing a new ingredient in a different light, trying a different process. Maybe I throw an idea at Flint and then he throws an idea back, and we're kind of spitballing back and forth, and that evolves into something that neither of us sort of had the intention to brew to start, but it comes out to be a cool beer. Or if it doesn't, we learned and we can move on, and we can,
And it's just a barrel.
Yeah, and it's just 1 barrel. And so we're totally cool with putting it down the drain if that ever happens, right?
Now, is it 1 barrel because of size? Like, you probably could have fit a 2-barrel system here. Was it just because, or was it because you didn't want to make that much beer at one time?
We could fit a 2-barrel system here, and it would have been about the same price. But 1 barrel gives us a little bit more versatility, and then a lot of it came down to the brew system itself. A lot of the 2-barrel systems that were out there were kind of cobbled together, and we ended up getting the SS BrewTech Nano system because it's everything. It's just miniaturized. So if we want to scale it up, it's really, really easy to do that. Just change the math.
So I actually love your system. It's kind of gorgeous and beautiful, and I want one for myself. Is it as nice to work with as it is to look at?
That's a complicated answer there.
Don't
most of
hold
the
back.
time.
Don't worry, we're not sponsored by SS Brew. So it's not
Yet.
a problem. Yet.
But yeah, so most of the time it's great. It's pretty intuitive. Everything's labeled. If you have brewed on other brew systems before, it makes sense. It's got a good flow to it. And if you're teaching someone for it, which is something that I try to do here, is educate the staff and eventually more of the community, it's a really nice way to show people how beer is truly made. That said, there have been massive electrical issues, and I have opened up the back of that thing at least a dozen times. I'm not an electrician, and I've rewired a lot of it with their tech support, and also come across some things and just been like, that's not right, and I shouldn't be able to identify that. So it's wonderful, except when it really is not, and then it's deeply frustrating.
What's interesting is it kind of feeds into the exploration part of what we're doing, just not in an intended way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, now,
'Cause,
now Flint's
this was
an
like
electrician.
this was in a second batch, I think, of those systems that they produced. So I think they were still figuring some things out along the way, and it just happened to be we figured them out along with them. But the one good thing about that is just with the timeline in general is we weren't pushing as fast. You know, if we were buying the brewery and then trying to open and push beer out of our system right away, that potentially would have been a problem.
Right.
And so Flint had sort of I wouldn't say a leisure time, but a less stressful sort of people overlooking his shoulders, so he could figure some of those issues out, which, you know, putting a silver lining on it, I think he's learned a lot about those systems.
Oh, yeah.
That he'll take, you know, down the line, and, you know, whether he works on a bigger system, you know, different systems, whatever, those are things that he'll take as valuable lessons.
Or if
for
he
sure.
goes and works for SS Brew Tech.
Yeah.
Or, you know, contracts as an electrician.
Right. There you
Yeah,
go.
there we go. You never know. You've got a bright future ahead of you. Electrifying. What's the biggest challenge you've had brewing here?
Besides electricity.
Besides working with us, yeah. And electricity.
Operating in the space, it's very, very small. So there are a couple of spaces where I have maybe 6 inches of clearance for me to slide through. So it's all about trying to find the right contortion that'll allow me to get through without getting caught on that piece of metal.
Well, I mean, how many square feet? It's tiny over there. And you have like 8 fermenters? 6 fermenters? Yeah, it's...
2 of them are up on a platform.
3 of them are
up on a platform above your head.
8 feet tall. And so it's operating in, it's about 120 square feet. So,
but it's sky rise. It's like built upward.
Yeah.
Like in New York City
I wouldn't
style.
even, like, if I saw a bedroom that big, I'd be like, I can't fit my bedroom.
No.
This isn't happening.
I mean,
I'll put a brewery in
when
here.
we
This
talk
is
about
fine.
glorified homebrew setup, it epitomes that, I think.
but yeah, so basically just trying to be on a ladder, trying to handle things. Everything is within arm reach, which is kind of nice. But I've got to make sure that I'm not leaning up against the HLT while I deal with that.
Cool.
Ouch. That sounds like something you've done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
So conceptually, how do you guys approach your beer?
It comes from a lot of different places.
Okay.
The beers that I'm most excited about result from just having a conversation with someone, and someone being excited about a flavor profile or something they've tried before, and us going down the road of, can we do that? Should we do that? How would we do that? And then we'll build a recipe from there. But it can also be a situation in which we've got some friends that we want to make a beer with, and we say, hey, what do you want to make? And they say a brewed IPA with Clove.
I said that.
Yeah, so,
I don't even know why I said that. I was like, why don't we do a brewed IPA?
I think because Jack said not an IPA. And yours was the immediate response afterwards.
And I said, well, then I brewed IPA, Jack. Anything but... I just had it in a glass of it. It was fantastic. Really came out good.
Thank you. And I'd never used that yeast before, so it was a way to kind of explore on something else.
You guys have the beer wall. You're the only beer walls, plural now, right, in New York City. It's awesome.
True? Is it? Are you guys the only ones?
Well, so we weren't the first, but
Okay.
I would venture to say that our approach to it, I think, is different than other people in New York City. I haven't really tested it out in other cities, so I can't make that claim.
Well, please explain exactly what it is
explain to what
for people
people
who might not know
So
what that is.
we like to call it the beer wall or the beer ATM. And essentially what it is when you come in, you give your credit card to the bartender and you start a tab. They're going to give you a card that activates the taps and tracks everything that you pour, but you pour it yourself. It's sort of the ultimate flight experience in that you can pour 1 ounce, 10 ounces, 5 ounces. It's totally up to you, but you get to explore the 24 taps that we have on. We love it in that it gives you sort of a de-stressed environment to try new beers. I had a woman come in right after we had launched the Williamsburg one, and she's like, I do not drink stouts. I'm dead set against stouts. I go, have you tried that one? And it happened to be one that was a little bit crazier, and it was a prairie one, and so it had a bunch of adjuncts and stuff in it. But I thought, okay, maybe she could get behind that because that's not an average stout.
Try an ounce.
Yeah, and exactly. She tried an ounce, and she loved it. And that's the cool part about it is getting people to explore along with us, to bring that word back around.
I love it. It's so fucking dangerous, though.
It is a little dangerous. There
wall.
are some safety precautions. Thank you. But it is a lot of fun. And ultimately, our ethos behind it, the way that we approach it, is that it's not sort of supplanting staff. It's not a way for us to get rid of bartenders. It's another way for our staff to interact with the guests. And there's been times in Dumbo specifically, which is a much bigger space, we actually will staff a person just on the beer wall, just to sort of be a sommelier, for lack of a better word, to curate the list along with the guest, to talk to them, show them how it works, pour an ounce for them if they're feeling a little hesitant on a beer, but just talk to them about why those beers are cool and why we chose those beers. Because every list is curated by each general manager of our stores, and so we want people to understand we didn't just pick these beers because the price point was cool. We actually are picking these to fit specific points. We don't have a tap list of all New England IPAs or all barrel-aged stouts. Right now we have an amber lager on, we have a sour, we have a Helles. Like, we like bringing the variety in, and so we can talk to people about that.
That's something I wanted to point out too, is that one thing I really love about the beer wall is the quality of everything. It's a lot of local breweries, but not everyone's local. They're all really great, and then you end up, if you're standing next to somebody and you're pouring one beer, they're pouring another, and you start talking about it, and you want to try the one next to it. Like, my girlfriend and I will come here, and we'll be like trying a little bit of everything. That's what I mean by dangerous. It's because it's a fun experience, and you want to try every single damn beer. After a while, you're just like, well, hey, I'm going to do an ounce of this.
Kind of want to go down the line.
Yeah, you really, but I never go for I'm going to go from 1 to 24. I kind of just bounce around, and then after a while, you're like, did I try 19 yet? I don't know. I'll try it again. But we actually, after we brewed, we ended up staying here. 2 of the brewers that were with us from the Nerys, we ended up staying here for a really long time, just kind of talking beer and trying beer and doing all that. And like, as far as a community-oriented way of drinking, was like a beer swap without a swap.
See, you hit on something that's very specific, and to me, that's where the magic happens with the beer wall. Is people look at it at first glance, and it's meant to be sort of a solitary thing. Oh, I don't have to interact with a bartender. I can go get what I want, and I can go back to my table and look on my phone, maybe do an untapped check-in. But to me, where it really works and where it's really humming is when there is that community involvement, right? You even said it a second ago where you were pouring something and the person next to you was pouring something, right? And you're like, oh, cool. What about that beer? And then when that engagement happens in that community environment, that ultimately is what Randolph's about. And that's where it sort of really ties into our whole picture of what we're trying to do. Is we don't want people to come in and check off the latest New England IPA or the barrel-aged stout and kind of hang out by themselves and sit on their phone. Sure, we'll if they want to come get a pint, we're not going to turn them away. But ultimately, the best thing is when people are gathering around the wall, talking about the beer they tried. Oh, why this is cool. Have you tried that beer? Oh, I went to this brewery. And that sort of community engagement, can't beat it.
Yeah. As far as community engagement, plus the games. Right. I love the games. I have a 9-year-old. We come to the Dumbo location on a regular basis. I have a beer, sometimes from the wall. Sometimes I want like one full beer of something, so I just buy it. And we play foosball, and inevitably someone will start talking to us. It's just out in the middle there. They'll laugh at how bad I am at foosball, that a 9-year-old can beat me. And yeah, it gets very entertaining.
I
very
appreciate
social.
your courage of announcing that on the podcast.
Well, that
it's
segues into where we're actually sitting. We're sitting in the expansion of the Williamsburg.
In a beautiful area with a bunch of seating and a
Last
game
time we
room
were
right in the
here,
middle.
did not look like this.
No.
This was pretty quick.
So a quick update on that is basically we added roughly 1,000 square feet, a little more than 1,000. And there's not a ton of tables, but we added the games, which is a big component. And then some bathrooms and office stuff that allowed us to change up the space that was here before a little bit to make our kitchen a little bit more efficient and stuff like that. And allow Flint to take up some of the bathroom space, which I think he appreciates.
Got a closet now.
Yeah, he has a brewing
It's
closet.
your very own closet that's right, to store shit, right?
Full of barrels yet?
Those are outside of it.
Oh, those are
I
outside.
just added 2 today.
Yeah.
Even better.
But the games goes back to that, and I think you hit on a good point in that, you know, we don't want our spaces to be that place where you kind of don't want to engage with the person next to you, kind of want to be shut off. Like if you could have a glass partition between you and the table next to you, you can do that. And, you know, sure, sometimes that is appropriate, and you know, we'll do our best to provide that sort of cozy experience. But ultimately, our places are meant to be experiential. And that you come in, you have fun. There's engagement on the beer wall. There's the shuffleboard tables. We just installed, you can see the screen here. It's going to have a Nintendo arcade game.
I saw the controllers. I got excited.
So those are wireless controllers. So you could literally be sitting on these bleacher seating and playing with somebody next to you in like tournament rounds. So that's the whole idea is, you know, and it kind of started to come out with the bottomless brunch thing that we did. We got to see that when people are here having that joyous, fun time, they start talking to each other and engaging, and it's less about your brunch but about our brunch. And for me, that's a big thing about what beer is and why I connected with beer so in depth, is because of that engagement with other people. I mean, that's what I liked about theater, and why I think I was gravitating towards craft beer was that connection with other people. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your background is, your politics, your religion, all that. I'm sure it'll come out over a course of a few pints.
A couple of beers, yeah.
But generally, when you're having a beer, anybody can have it. It brings people together, and we can all enjoy it. And that's the best part. There's too many things in this world that can make you upset and pissed off. But enjoying a good beer, that there's nothing like that. With friends. Enjoying the good beer with friends and new friends as you meet. Yeah.
I think we should end it on that. That's beautiful. I think it's a great way to end it. I really like spending time at the Randolph in Dumbo. I was just down there. My daughter had a dentist appointment, which is always super exciting. And she's like, "Daddy," I'm like, "Yeah, what? Can we go play games at Randolph?" I'm like, "Okay."
Isn't that so cool that your 9-year-old wants to go to a brewery? I mean, and I don't mean like she wants to go there because, you know, she wants to try the latest IPA. But I mean the fact that the brewery culture is what we talked about a lot, was welcoming. Yeah. It's community oriented. I mean, people have children and people have breweries, and, you know, the fact that they're welcoming to everybody is awesome.
Yeah.
And that's my catchword. My catchphrase is awesome.
I totally get that. But it's got great beer. It's got a great atmosphere. So I dig it a lot.
I really like the Williamsburg location too. There's something about that. I don't know. There's just something about the entire vibe. It's kind of punk. They have all this kind of punk music stuff up on the walls. And you know, that's me. I'm a goddamn punk. And those guys are just so nice. And Flint is just such a smooth talker.
He really is. We should have him do the commercial next time.
We should.
I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, I think that's about it for this one, isn't it?
I think that might be about it. Join us in 2 weeks where we talk to some other people about stuff. And
tell all your friends about the podcast and leave comments.
And please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We would love for you to subscribe. It costs nothing, and it allows us to track you.
Like all of your movements. It actually allows us to track you everywhere. So, yeah. Have fun, Rob. No, I'm tracking you. I'm watching you, Rob. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, this is Flint Whistler, and see what you can brew at Randolph Beer. Signing off for the night. Have a good one.
How can we get that bass into the beer?
Thank you so much, guys. That was really a blast. Wow, Kyle, Flint, thank you so much.
Oh, none of it recorded.
Oh, God, we got to do it again.